I'm Bill Russell, creator of This Week Health, where our mission is to transform healthcare one connection at a time. Welcome to Newsday, breaking down the health IT headlines that matter most. Let's jump into the news. All right, it is Newsday, and today I am joined by the visionary Sarah Richardson and the let's see, what are we going to call Drex this? Sarah, I'm going to let you. What adjective would you use to describe Drex DeFord?
Irreplaceable.
Oh,
Oh,
wow.
Aw.
That's perfect.
what are you
All
going to call
right.
Bill?
The panel has been convened and we are going to do a news day. Today, we are the news. So we are going to be talking about, we just finished a weekend of 229 Project meetings, summits, and I hosted CIOs in the Southeast. Sarah, CxOs, some aspiring, some actual sitting CIOs in the West, out in Napa. And Drex, you were with me with
Yeah.
the security officers in Atlanta. I know it's going to sound like, well, you didn't know where you were, Bill? Is that what
Well,
was
I was
going
in the room right next to you.
on? Exactly. Yeah, it was a pretty rowdy room for security officers, man. You guys were laughing and hooting and hollering. I mean, people were even commenting on it.
It's great fun. And, this was one of those really interesting. We usually have about half the room normally in a 229 summit, at least for me, about half are alumni and about half are new people. And so we continue to grow the community. In this particular instance, two people were alumni and the rest of the room were new people. And so it was great fun because they almost created their own culture, which fit really well with everything that we normally do. But they did have a lot of fun. And we did have a lot of fun. No matter how hard the topics were, how many challenges there were, there's always room for a little laughter, which was great.
That's awesome. Here's what we're going to do. At the beginning of our meetings, we generally go up to a whiteboard and say, what's one topic you want to make sure we discuss before we leave? I'm going to take AI, so you guys can't take AI. Um, and essentially, what I'm going to talk about is AI governance. And governance is not a fun topic, but there was it was really interesting to me how some organizations were struggling with this and others had really simplified it and made it something to go with. And the simple framework I thought that I told them I was going to take this and run with it, is they have two AI governance frameworks, one for trusted vendors, one for untrusted. Not untrusted like we don't trust them, but untrusted meaning we haven't done business with them in the past. Like
Mhm.
Epic would be a trusted AI vendor. And not that you're not going to vet it and that kind of stuff, but you're not going to send them the same 200 questions that you're going to send startup X that is coming out with a new AI model. And it was interesting because one organization, they were saying, hey, look, I got to get in front of this, man. Our backlog is ridiculous. Like we won't even look at, maybe 3 or 4 partners a month because we're moving this slow. And the other person essentially said, look, we split it into two. We have a different process for trusted vendors, your Workdays, your ServiceNows, your whoever your trusted partners happen to be, and your untrusted. And he said, we had the same problem you did. And he goes, now we don't have a problem because our team that really does vet AI is very much focused on the untrusted vendors for strategic projects. And then they're focused on rolling out the features, the AI features that have been given to them. I'm curious if Sarah, did AI governance come up at all in your discussion?
It did, but it came up in terms of more of when and what to automate, sort of the maturity pathway for healthcare. But here's the deal, governance is going to help you determine what's a quick win, what's potentially measured expansion, and what may be future state, and how to create that decision tree. So it did. Different conversation than you, but definitely an important aspect of what was discussed.
What do you think is going to be the foundation for AI success? If we're sitting with an organization a year from now or 2 years from now, what's going to differentiate the ones that are doing the right things now versus the ones that are maybe not figuring out what to do right now? Drex, what are your thoughts?
I think the ones that are really focused on the problem and figuring out how to fix or group together or make a better situation than the situation they have, if they put their energies there, And this is very typical of everything that we would say, focus on the problem. Don't do it just because you can do it. Have a good reason to implement these technologies and take advantage of them, the way that you roll them out, the pressure that you put on end users to adopt them. All of that should really be focused on problems. I think we have some folks who do that, but I also see some, there's some wildcats out there too.
Some wildcats. Sarah, what do you think is going to define the winners and losers in the next couple of years with regard to AI? I use losers kind of loosely there.
Yeah. Those that stay, so an earlier conversation we had in a recent Newsday was the simplification process. Don't overcomplicate it. There are things you can automate today. Like what is super annoying to you in your organization as far as like just task spaces? Do that. And then think about next. Like if you get some wins there, like, okay, create a decision tree. Like should we have rules-based and automate it sooner? If it's low cost, can we automate it? And if it's not as high of a patient safety or risk issue, or go slower if those things are in there? And then do our clinicians and patients trust the process? And how do we measure it objectively? But being able to connect those dots and create a really a conversation starter inside of your organization, determine, should I do this now? How does this become autonomous for clinical ops? And then really areas where your organization can truly measure it and go just beyond the IT element. And so better start doing it and start doing it now, but have a framework that's simple to follow and makes sense for people to understand. Biggest thing is removing all that fear, uncertainty, and doubt that goes around AI because it doesn't have to be scary. And by the way, it's already happening, so get your arms around it sooner than later.
Perfect is the enemy of good part of this,
Yeah,
right?
the whole human loop.
Like
100%.
try to have a plan to solve world hunger, just like pick a problem and start working on it.
Yeah, there you go. What do I hate doing that I can automate? Ask people to, I'm a big fan, Bill, of ask the open-ended questions of people for people like, what is something we could automate today that we don't want to be doing ourselves? Where is it less risky or not scary for us to start to do these types of things? When people feel like they're part of the decision-making process, goes back to all the OCM principles we know well, then those are the ones that'll win faster than others.
All right. Only because our production people asked me to be more adversarial, which can you imagine they would ask me to do that like on purpose? It's crazy. You are mostly right. Both of you are mostly right. This is me being my doing the old McLaughlin factor. I don't know if you guys aren't old enough for that, are
Oh
you?
yeah, no, I know McLaughlin. Yeah,
Oh,
yeah.
okay. Yeah.
Oh,
You are wrong, Morton. Sorry. But I think it's going to be those who recognize that this is an organizational change management project, period. Like you have to build it on a foundation of understanding culture within your organization, building champions, essentially defining what your objectives are. I agree with you. The right problems are going to matter, but so are the metrics, which is what, Drex, you mentioned the right problems. Sarah, you mentioned the measuring the outcomes and those kinds of things. Every good organizational change management project understands that it's built on a foundation of trust, and the trust comes from solving the problems that people really have, and then measuring those problems and showing them that that you solved them, and then they say, "Okay, yeah, go ahead and do the next one, and the next one, and the next one." And I think we're going to see in 2 years, we're going to see some organizations have solved, 100 problems, and some are still working to solve their first five. And people are worried about the policies, they're worried about education, and all these things are important. They're absolutely important, but I'm not even sure they're starting correctly. The best start I heard was from Shakib over at Children's Hospital of Philadelphia when he said, I can't manage to all these different expectations. So he brought his entire leadership, not his IT leadership, his system leadership into a room and had different people come in to train on different aspects of AI. But he asked them a very simple question: what is our AI ambition as an organization? And he had everything from 1 to 12. It's like, no, the scale was 1 to 10, but somebody's like 12, we got to go faster, bigger,
Mm.
use AI for everything. And so he goes, the only problem with that is I can't manage to that. Like as an organization, we can't be 1 to 12. We've got to sort of hone in on what we're going to be. And at the end of that meeting, they honed in as an organization, we're going to be this. And I like it when you find that agreement because, I've seen CIOs walk in and go, well, we're going to be fast followers or we're going to be early adopters or whatever. I'm like, does everybody agree with that? Or are you just getting yourself out on a ledge because, you've made a decision, but have you brought it again? It's an organizational change management. So it's just, you got to bring everybody along.
Do you think there's something though about you can be a couple of those things at the same time? Like, I want to have some part of the organization that's working on a moonshot, but quite honestly, 95% of the organization needs to be focused on moon landings, not moon shots. Like they can go out there and try to have crazy ideas and do really cool stuff. And maybe we can figure out how to support that. Most of the organization, though, is really about solving problems and measuring how we improved or how we made the situation better for patients and families. Can you do both those things at the same time?
There's certain days you would ask me that question, I would answer one way, and certain days I'd
Yeah,
answer it another.
yeah.
And given the uncertainty that's been created with the regulatory environment and reimbursement, and given the financial implications of what's going on just across the entire industry, there are times for moonshots, but I think a lot of times healthcare gets outside of its swim lane in these moonshots. And sometimes it pays off, sometimes it doesn't, but more times than not, it doesn't pay off. And think I'm quoting you, who was quoting somebody else, where he said, "Hey, we don't have as much money anymore to make these bets." You know,
That was
they,
from our Palo Alto dinner of interesting. That quote came from Silicon Valley.
And it came from a CFO. I can't, everything that I place a bet on today has to be a sure thing. I don't have the financial wherewithal to place bets on things that might not pay off. And it's a really interesting, way of thinking. I think it's the macroeconomic pressures of the environment and the regulatory environment, the political environment, everything that's going on right now that we see folks pulling in their horns and being way more conservative about what they're going to do and how they're going to do it, which I think is a really great reason to, focus on those. What are those small things you can fix and make progress on? That's really where you should be putting energy. And if you can do that, it sets you up to do the bigger things.
dude, I just interviewed Stefan Proctor over at CHOP. It just so happened. And him and like one other person used fire and all these things to pull in the information and create a way of interrogating the medical record just through using tools that all this stuff that already exists for interoperability and the large language model. And I think these bets, like we don't have to make the multi-million dollar bets. We just have to give people margin, give them time and let the like encourage their creativity and say, look, I'm pretty sure, and I give him a lot of credit. And I know the last time I talked to him, I think I slammed him pretty hard, but Sarah did more with G and like a team of 3 people than
Yeah.
most healthcare organizations can do with a team of 100. So,
Yeah.
the right people given the right support, flexibility, and time can really do some creative things.
Sarah
We
and
used to
I,
call
you and I
myself,
talk about this all the time too. The real epitome of innovation is a lack of resources. That's when you get really creative. Go back to the space example of Apollo 11. What is it? The movie where they're like, okay, we have to create a filter to filter the air. And here's Apollo
13. It's
13. Thank you. Yes.
unlucky 13 is how you
Yes,
remember it.
exactly. And so it was like they dumped the box out. This is what we have on the spacecraft. How are you going to make an air filter out of that? People get super innovative. I think it's the same with you and a lot of your experiences.
I laugh because that's how I used to hire PC techs at the county. I just dump a bunch of parts on a table. I'm like, if you can make this thing pretty, you're hired. And sometimes there was enough stuff in the box, and sometimes there wasn't. And then the ones
Turn
that you
that
knew,
into a computer.
hey, there's not enough. But I'll tell you, G and I used to call those the hold my beer moments. And I had a little team of humans that like super smart, so they could get through their work in like 30 hours or less a week. And I'm like, what should we do with our 10 hours? I was like, go create stuff that people don't know they need yet. Go through things, go find cool ways to do it. And if you get one yes out of 10, then that's a win. And then that's the hold your beer kind of a thing. And so you give people space to be creative without completely breaking things. You've got really smart people on your team. Think about all 3 of us have either won or sometimes lost by just putting it all out there sometimes because we're willing to take appropriate risks. But if leadership doesn't like it, so be it. But sometimes those have been the biggest hallmarks of our career. And it wasn't because we wanted the glory, it's because look what our teams could do.
Sarah, something from your board. What was on your board that you want to throw out?
I loved this because it's actually going to be a topic for an upcoming podcast on Flourish. And that's sourcing strategy, that whole sourcing strategy with engagement. So you've got sort of 3 tiers of work. What do you keep in-house that is relationship critical? What do you near shore that needs some collaboration? And then what do you offshore that's more process driven? And the reason all of that matters so much is like when you start thinking about sourcing decisions and you frame it as like we're moving repetitive work efforts offshore so you can focus on strategic, interesting problems, then it becomes more about the elevation of the work, not elimination of the work. And, how do you do more offshoring, nearshoring, or even outsourcing to a degree without disengaging your team or compromising what your clinicians, your peers, and even your patients value? That is a strategic analysis of those types of tiers of work, but people are being asked to do it more and more. It is not a one and done. And the thing that I believe is most important, other than the OCM aspect of it, is truly if you just punt something over the fence to a degree, it takes a very long time to rebuild that if it turns out to have been a bad decision. And so you really got to have the right evaluation criteria of what you're staffing and how you're staffing it appropriately.
All right, what's the question? What's the question you want to throw out to get us started?
The question I would ask even both of you, if you put your CIO hats back on, is how are you determining the right work to be sourced accordingly without either disengaging your team or compromising value in your organization?
Yeah, Drex, you go first.
Well, I'm just sitting here thinking,
Open-ended, so.
yeah, I'm just thinking about the stuff that I have a hard time hiring for and have a hard time retaining people for. And the third category is kind of the work that is the boring, grindy stuff that people have to do every day, and sometimes they don't, and that creates a risk of us on the security side being exposed. So trying to figure out like who are the companies who do these kinds of things that actually we can leverage, that it's better for us and better for our team, that it's being done regularly, consistently, and being done well. And those organizations can do it for multiple organizations. And since they can do that, we probably also benefit from that crowdsourcing of information that they get across multiple organizations. So, I'm always looking for, it goes back to the problem. Where am I really having problems running things? And because it's probably tied to some sort of a personnel or skill problem. And then how do I figure out how to make that a better situation?
I'm not sure. I'm thinking offshore, nearshore. I'm thinking AI agents is what I'm thinking right now. If I can offshore it or nearshore it, there's a potential that I'm going to be doing it with AI agents. And I'm not sure that because we had this discussion as well as we start to proliferate these agents, which are actually performing workloads that are formerly performed by people. Potential. Let's just keep it in IT, right? So there's a whole bunch of stuff in IT that is pretty rote, pretty mundane, if you will. Like, just make sure you clean this up and do this thing that agents will do fairly well. And when you put an AI engine on top of that agent, it will only get smarter. I shared the concern about how do you introduce this in a way that doesn't disrupt the culture of your organization? Because I think we're getting platitudes right now of people saying, well, we're just going to, create more margin for this staff to do more things or, whatever. We're not going to get rid of any staff. I think that could be true in a lot of organizations. I don't think it's going to be true in all organizations. So
There's a
I
lot of
agree.
places where
I'm worried about it.
literally you need to flip the table over too. I mean, I just think we can try to be nice and be nice about this, but I think there are a lot of places the table needs to be flipped over. We just need to do what's right for the organization and not.
But Sarah, don't you think there's more work? I mean, the pipeline of work is insatiable. So if we could really offload some work, couldn't we actually get more stuff done?
You can, but remember, there's a whole side of upskilling. And so everywhere I've ever gone, I've had to flip the table. And sometimes I've been appreciated for it, and a lot of times not always, and depending on who's doing the asking. But you don't go into completely transform something with all the technological benefits that may be current state, which is usually why you hire a new CIO is to modernize your organization unless the one's staying up to date. But that always comes with a disruption of humans. Now, the thing we don't talk about is, hey, we exited 20 people but hired 5. So the 10xer aspect of like the skill set of certain humans that are needed to do the work even when you hear about Accenture laying off 12,000 people, they hired 5,000. They laid off, so the net was seven. It's a big number. But
So
if you
that's
were to take
they
that,
upskilled. They laid off 12,000 and hired 5,000 people with greater skills. That
I
is,
did
I
that.
mean, that's
I've done
interesting.
it at several organizations. And the thing is, when you say, yeah, you might be affected, people will either step up or just play possum. And some people self-select. I mean, it's harsh, but it's reality. I mean, I've been eliminated. I've been like, I mean, heck, you do consolidations and mergers. Sometimes you're picked, sometimes you're not. And that consolidation or merger can be inclusive of advanced technologies. And so it's our responsibility as leaders to make sure that it's empathetic and humane, but also we're getting hired to run a company and be thoughtful and respectful of human beings in the process. Now you're going to do that by running agents as well. And so it just takes on a whole new aspect of the first part of being a true leader, and that's like understand where your people are coming from.
We definitely see other companies do that too. They lay off 5,000 people and they hire 5,000 people. They're hiring people with different skills because the world has changed and the product has changed and the customers have changed. And it's just they have to disrupt themselves or they're just going to, go into oblivion. So from the business leader aspect, you have to totally think about that. There's a time coming we're going to lay off 5,000, we're going to hire 5,000 agents. Maybe not all at the same time, but that's essentially going to be the effect.
I,
And it's always tough when you do it.
Drex, I want to hear yours. I mean, the thing I will say about this is I'm more and more convinced that leaders within the organization, I think we're going to have more top-heavy organizations who are overseeing agents and other things. But these people are going to have skills, like operational skills. Could be project management, like you're overseeing a team of, I don't know, 100 agents or whatever it happens to be. But it also could be whatever. I'm not even sure entirely what it is, but I think more and more when you're overseeing this stuff, it is not going to be a situation where I mean, you're going to have to know some things, right?
I think you're really going to have to know the workflow. You're really going to have to understand how the workflow works. And it's going to be a whole different skill
Right.
than supervising people. You're going to be supervising agents who may be spawning their own agents as part of a project. And you need to understand how that really works and what kind of tasks they're getting and where do they need to be supervised? How do you have the human in the
Yeah.
loop? Where is the right place?
Really understand the workflow, really understand the data. Yes, absolutely. Drex, what was on the board for the security officers?
There were so many things on the board, but one part of the conversation I found really interesting, really almost didn't have to do with technology. And the way that they put it was being proactive versus reactive in the design and culture of the organization that you're building. So that when one person leaves and another person comes in, how does that not force like everything changes? And so it was the conversation around, how do you build culture? How do you build culture in a not just a security part of the organization, but this is something that we face and work on all the time. How do you build culture so that it is continuous and it's not based on one person? When they leave, everything changes.
Just out of curiosity from the two of you, what's the number one word? Like you're hiring a new person. I know there's 10 in your head, but just the one word to make sure that your culture becomes what you want it to be in order to continue to thrive in this AI world.
Agility. I mean, don't not building something that's brittle. You have to be able to move and change. And that has to be a good thing.
So you
Embrace that
so,
change management.
so in an interview process, you're looking for agility in the next person you hire. Like they don't fall in love with any one thing. They're always looking around and going, "Yep, okay, yeah, we can do this better. We can do it different."
Yeah.
Yeah, I can see that. Sarah, what's the one word for you?
Ambiguity.
Being able to handle it or being able to create it?
Typically handle it, although, but sometimes you want the creator, but please check in with me first. But for the most part, everywhere I've worked, change is daily. Doesn't matter the size of your organization. Are you okay with that? And how do you handle it? And if you don't handle that like rapid, almost like questionable change on a daily basis, you're probably not going to do well in an organization where I am.
We talk about that as being comfortable with your uncomfortableness. That
Yeah.
is the world that we live in today, all the way around.
I don't know what my word is. I'm struggling. First of all, because you guys put this thing at 5:30 at night, and I'm more of a morning person. But I'm struggling with the word because I used to think, I want problem solvers. But more and more, I want problem solvers that solve problems well. Like, I don't know what's a good, I want to, too many people are solving, like they're polishing an old thing. It's like they're solving a problem with an old thing instead of going, hey, you know what? If we solve it this way, we're not going to have to solve it again. Like it's going to be solved and it's going to get better. I, yeah,
That's a disruptor. I mean, I think
Swiss
about
Army knife.
yeah, again, well, good. You guys are struggling with the words too, and you're on the West Coast, so
what do
um,
you listeners think the right word is?
Put it in our chat or put it in our DMs. Let us know.
I have a lot of just a lot of experience with people who solve problems, and when I come in and I look at how they solve the problem, I'm like, okay, I don't have time right now, but we're going to solve this. We're going to solve the problem you just solved because it's going to create another problem down here, and I already see it. Like but I don't have time right now. But in 6 months, I know this is going to blow up. We'll get to it. I
See,
want
I do
people who
that, I do
solve
that for you
problems
now.
permanently.
We do both for you now, don't we? Isn't that why you hired us?
Yeah, well, I mean, you guys different again, as Drex said earlier, hire people that can solve very specific problems for you and know the problems you're trying to solve. And you guys solve those problems for this organization and I think somewhat for the industry. So it's kind of awesome. Drex, you didn't tee up a question for us. What's your question for Sarah and I?
Well,
That's
I think that was the question, the like, how do you build that kind of culture in your organization so that when one person leaves or you leave, that the world can just continue to run without a huge disruption?
well, we'll keep picking on them so because we already mentioned them once. So Sarah, if you lost G, who is arguably brilliant from an architecture standpoint, what are you going to do?
Well, the cool thing about G is he has a whole band of merry men that follow him around and who are selectively available for different types of engagement. So I always said, who are the 2 or 3 people on your team or like you that I can always rely on just in case something happens? And so there was not as much as a succession plan as there was like a disaster recovery plan for him. Because let's be honest, I'm a big proponent, as you know, when you go on PTO, you're not available. So and he's in Tahiti, I'm not going to bug him with something. And so we had 2 guys that were equally commensurate and capable who'd worked with him in the past who could pick up some of those pieces if his mind wasn't there to pick. And so I believe it's important to always know who else in your organization can answer those questions. That's as much about internal, BCDR from a human perspective as
Or
it is about
durability?
your succession planning. So there should not ever be only one person who can answer the question.
The organization is going to push back on this, by the way. Either the person with the knowledge doesn't want to impart it, or the people you're asking to cross-train or overlap, whatever it is within an organization. But it's just been over decades of people looking at me saying, no, I want to expand what I do and that kind of stuff. And the minute you sort of give them, hey, here's your opportunity, you can, start to do this. All of a sudden they think there's value in specialization. I think there is value in specialization, but it's not as great as having overlap and the continuity, especially as we're developing some of these new things where you have to have deep understanding of the data and the process. You don't want that bottled into one person. How dangerous is that?
Which is why I can leave you guys to go host an HCSP interview and you guys can finish up the
Is that you?
That's my exit statement. I'm gonna go interview an overtimer.
Wow. Fantastic. Well, all right. I guess we're done. Sarah says we're done. We're done. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, Sarah.
That's Newsday. Stay informed between episodes with our daily insights email. And remember, every healthcare leader needs a community they can lean on and learn from. Subscribe at thisweekhealth.com/subscribe. Thanks for listening. That's all for now.